A very good evening and welcome to the panel discussion on the good, bad, and the ugly of the menstrual policy. I'm Ruthvika. I am from Youngistan Foundation. It's a grassroots not for profit organization. I work as a menstrual health and hygiene advocacy movement specialist. So, here we have a huge panel of experts who have been working in the menstrual health and hygiene space for quite some time. Just to give you a small background of why we are doing this panel discussion, we would like to inform you that for the last couple of weeks, per se, we all are part of this MHM collective WhatsApp group. Thanks to social media, it's helping us connect more in a better way. So after the Supreme Court has directed state governments and the state governments to provide what are they currently doing for menstrual health and hygiene management in order to form a uniform policy. So after that, the policy experts and experts in this field have come together to also push their narrative onto what's to be added in the uniform policy. So for the last 1 week, we have been doing Instagram live sessions on Womcom Matters page uh, with speakers who are from civil society organizations who have been doing fantastic work in the MHM space across the country, sharing their best practices as to how they are and their interventions in this MHM space. So, in this panel discussion, there is a lot more to uncover. So, before we begin, I would like to request the Kaboom Talks team to share a small video that would be setting the context of today's panel discussion. Over to you, Payal.
There are 375 million menstruating people in India, which means every day there are over a million people menstruating. And that is not a small number. Therefore, we should care about it.
A comprehensive policy on menstrual health and hygiene needs to go beyond schools because girls who do not attend schools menstruate too. Women who are not in schools anymore menstruate too. And they are all around us, living with us, working with us, fighting with us, competing with us, and supporting us. And therefore, we should care about it.
Menstruation is not just about access to a hygienic menstrual product, it is about having a choice and the agency to exercise that choice. We should care because it is our responsibility that all menstruators have access as well as agency to decide what makes them comfortable.
To manage menstruation, people need functioning toilets. Not just toilets, but ones with water, dustbins, some light and ventilation, a door that locks. Sounds basic, right? लेकिन नहीं है ना. So how can we not care?
Menstruation is as much about health as it is about hygiene. And don't you think we must care about the health of menstruators?
And finally, menstruation is not just about the 5 days of periods. It is also not something that happens once in a while. So let's talk about that everydayness of it. And let's talk openly. We must care because we are the ones who can create an environment where talking about periods is not a taboo.
Well, that's a basic context to set for the panel discussion. So, moving on to our panel discussion again, the good, bad, and the ugly of menstrual policy. We'll move on with the first panel speaker. Here we have Dr. Arundati Muralidharan. Arundati Muralidharan is a public health professional with over 15 years of experience in India. She is a passionate advocate of menstrual health and hygiene for almost 2 decades. Her work on this issue lies at the intersection of programs, evidence generation, and policy advocacy on informed product choice, waste management solutions, and quality standards for products and waste technologies. She works closely with national and state governments and a range of non government organizations. Arundhati, the first and foremost question to you is from your standpoint, how can policy frameworks be holistic and structured to ensure long term sustainability and continuity in menstrual health and hygiene education and practices transcending changes in government priorities and leadership?
Thanks so much for the great question, Ruthvika, and it's fantastic to be a part of Kaboom Talks and to talk about this particular issue with you, Nirmala, and Lakshmi ji, and everyone who's a part of the audience. Ruthvika, you've raised some important points. One is looking at this uniform, comprehensive national policy, but you've also asked about how do we make this sustainable and long-lasting, despite changes that we may see in priorities. And other aspects, that make an issue go up and down in terms of how we're looking at it and what kind of and how we prioritize it. So one is when we're looking at a comprehensive policy for menstrual health and hygiene. One is I would say that we need to look at it beyond just menstrual hygiene management, which is how we've looked at it in India and globally for many, many years. Because now we do see this far more than just a hygiene issue, while we recognize that hygiene is critical and hygienic management of periods is important. But we also see that this is a health issue and it's also a matter of human rights as well. So we want to look at it in a broader framework of health as well as hygiene. And when we're looking at this holistically, this is something that we at MHAi talked about a long time ago, is what's that value chain that we look at and what are those essential components. We certainly want to make sure that a comprehensive program, comprehensive policy addresses awareness and ensuring that everyone has access to knowledge and information about menstruation, the menstrual cycle, menstrual hygiene, and other associated topics and issues related to that. And alongside, we also know that we need to be addressing social norms, gender norms. So those other factors that are deeply kind of influencing how we experience a period and what do we do. So how are we getting at those socio-cultural norms as well as other factors, economic factors, etc. The second kind of big pillar that we want to address through a comprehensive policy framework is that of access to a basket of menstrual products that enable any person who has a period to choose what they want to use based on their own needs, their context, their ability to pay, their preference, their comfort, so many of these factors. And what do we need to support access to that basket of products, and whether it's information, whether it's support, whether it's having a peer group, like what do we need to enable that choice and then safe hygienic usage of those products. The third then brings to slightly more enabling environment, like a physical enabling environment and the social enabling environment that can help us. So a physical enabling environment is, do we have toilets, do we have water, do we have facilities for washing and drying, do you have disposal facilities, do we have downstream waste management facilities? And this is the kind of physical infrastructure we need. I would also add here things like nutrition services, health services for young people and for others who may have menstrual problems or questions, mental health services that some people may need if they're having certain kinds of menstrual problems. And then we also need to look at that social enabling environment. How are we working with parents, with families, with teachers, and with others who we're intersecting in our daily lives and in our lives in general, who have either direct or indirect impacts, on our experience of a period. And I think that when we are looking at this value chain, we want our comprehensive policy to address these big pillars of work. And the way that we may do this may differ across contexts, but these particular pillars of awareness, of addressing social and gender norms, of enabling access to a basket of products and creating that enabling environment for safe and hygienic usage, and of enabling a physical and supportive social environment. I would say at least these three big pillars. Your second part of the question, I think, is really critical. We've seen great action on India, right? This is not the first time we're talking about a menstrual policy. This movement has been happening for more than a decade in the country. But the thing is, you're asking, how do we sustain this? How do we make sure it goes beyond a scheme? Goes beyond a political commitment that we see for a period of time. And I think these are questions that we're wrestling with. We don't have a clear-cut answer, but something that we've been thinking about at MHAi, that how do you do this, is that we know that especially through government programs, they have programs that last for a long period of time. So, for example, you have an adolescent health program under the National Health Mission, under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. You've got maternal health programs. You've got programs that are looking at cervical and breast cancer. So we've got these programs that are here to stay. How can we ensure that attention to menstrual health and hygiene and action for menstrual health and hygiene can be incorporated within programs, whether they're related to health, nutrition, education, water sanitation, livelihoods, women's empowerment? So, can we incorporate elements of this value chain within that? Now, this may not be the perfect way to do it, but what this does is it becomes a part of a larger program, and these programs have a long shelf life because they're dealing with issues that are going to take a longer time for us to resolve in the country or in any country. And therefore, we can, we can somewhat enable that continued attention to this over time. And this is addition to having like a standalone program for menstrual health and hygiene that we've had under different departments at a national and at a state level. So I think this is one thing that we think that can help like sustained action and investment. The other is actually keeping the conversation alive. And this is a fantastic role of civil society organizations, researchers. It's such a vibrant community that we have here, of those of us who are outside of the government sector, who often support the government or liaison and partner with them for many of these initiatives. And I think our role is also to keep that flag flying, raise issues, do the research, highlight insights from the field as practitioners. And if we keep that going year on year, and there are ways then that we can continue to drive attention to this issue and the older parts, the unfinished business, as well as new and emerging issues that are related to menstrual health and hygiene. I'll stop here.
Great. Thank you so much, Arundati. I think you've beautifully highlighted the three pillars to make a policy and what needs to be added into the policy. So, moving to our third panel speaker, Nirmala Nair, who is the founder and director of Kaboom Talks. She is an experienced creative strategist and designer, passionate about driving social change through innovation, participation, and collaboration. Nirmala ji, you have been instrumental in leading the Menstrual Hygiene Day campaign since 2017. How have these campaigns contributed to creating awareness and breaking taboos around menstruation? And how can such awareness campaigns pave the way for effective policy change?
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Ruthvika. Um, so, I think we need to start looking at Menstrual Hygiene Day campaigning as something that goes beyond wanting to just break taboos. I think the whole idea of Menstrual Hygiene Day was how do we sort of make the conversation menstruator centric? I mean, of course, it started as girl centric, and as we've moved on and we've started using menstruators as a more inclusive term. So, how does a campaign become menstruator centric? Is being the core focus of the campaign itself. And I think a lot of work that we do where we are co-creating content with girls on the ground and young women on the ground is really about trying to understand menstruation from their perspective and really understand what the questions they have are and answer those questions. And I think what campaigns like Menstrual Hygiene Day do is really feed into policy, right? Because policy seems like such this big word which is far removed from us as citizens. But the fact is that people and policy are two sides of the same coin. The policy is for people, and therefore it needs to be people centric. And what policies need to do is really understand what people want and then try and answer that, and which is where we go back to that conversation of how we need to move beyond just hygiene. I mean, of course hygiene is important, but we need to move beyond that. We need to move beyond this idea of wanting to manage women's bodies, because it's not really about that. It's much more than that. And a conversation around menstruation can be a holistic conversation that essentially becomes something that focuses on equity, that focuses on empowerment, that focuses on an enabling environment for a menstruator, not just for a day, not just for 5 days, but really for a lifetime. And that is the reason why I think all of us have been talking about how the policy needs to start looking at menstruation from a comprehensive lens and not really a single lens of providing free menstrual products, because we don't know how sustainable that is, or if that is what is required. We really need to start seeing this from the lens of the menstruator and understand what are their needs, and are we really answering all those needs. And that's the role that campaigns play, essentially, in building these new narratives that people can participate in.
Great. So I think that's where your behavior change campaigns strike in, but making people as the forefront of the important conversations of menstrual health. Beautiful. Thank you, Nirmalaji. That was very well put. We'll move to the next speaker. Arundati, you were highlighting a while ago that, a product basket. That's what you were mentioning. But in the governments, we have seen the idea of providing free sanitary napkins to the people across, because you could also measure it. You can also understand how many people you have distributed the sanitary napkins to. So, if what's your when we are considering the empowerment of menstruators through choice, the concept of menstrual period basket comes into light, menstrual product basket. So, while governments make strides in distributing free sanitary napkins for menstrual management, how and when should the menstrual product basket idea be integrated? How can we successfully introduce and oversee the implementation of the product basket concept at a state level within institutions and beyond?
Um, so I think that it's important to have a product basket, and it's something that we at MHAi we call informed choice. That you should have access to a range of period products, and you should be able to make that choice as a person who has a period to what you want to use, and you may want to use more than one type of product. But I also want to step back for our audience to say, why do we think informed choice is so important? Why is this product basket very important to us? And I like data, so I'm going to go back to data, and we're going to look at we have the National Family Health Survey 5, and when we look at it, the number that's been projected to us is that 77.6% of India is using a hygienic or young women in India are using a hygienic method of protection during their periods, and this is mostly sanitary pads. And yes, the data does show that. But when we dig into the data, we're seeing several nuances here. What we see there is, while yes, 77% or plus are using a hygienic product, when we dig into it, when we look at it by urban-rural differences, when we look at it by young women who have no education or very low levels of education, when we look at it by scheduled caste and scheduled tribe, we see that there is a significant proportion of young women who are continuing to use cloth, while they may also use sanitary pads. And this is important for us. It's not to say that we want to convert all those cloth users to sanitary pad users, but it actually shows that there is an opportunity for us to look at reusable products, whether they're cloth pads, menstrual cups, or others. So I think that the data is showing us that while sanitary pads have indeed and undoubtedly become more available, more accessible, government schemes have had a big role to play in it, as well as private sector companies that have enabled their product access. A lot of entrepreneurs who have come into the game and made disposables available. We still have cloth that's being used, and for me and for several of us, this is actually not a bad thing. It shows an opportunity, it shows a need, it's showing a preference, and it shows that there is a gap that we need to fill by enabling and widening this product basket to enable anyone who has a period to choose what they want. We're seeing a lot of promising research in India on menstrual cups in rural areas, tribal areas, low-income areas, slums. And again, these are small studies, but they're very promising studies that say that menstrual cups can be a viable option, not just for high-income women living in the big metro cities of India, but also for girls and women who are from low income and disadvantaged backgrounds. But there's a certain kind of support that we need to introduce these products. So I think that is huge scope. And as a large community, I think we're trying to figure out, how do we do this? How do we build the evidence base for introducing reusable cloth pads, menstrual underwear, menstrual cups, and other innovative products that may come our way in the future? Now, what does this mean for government schemes? And I think here also we need to step back and say, why have government schemes emphasize so heavily on disposable sanitary pads. Ruthvika, you've already pointed out one reason, right? It's a tangible product that we can give, we can measure, we can say we've reached so many people. And that is important, especially when you're government and you are trying to reach people. But the other thing is the narrative that was created, 10, 15, 20 years ago is that sanitary pads are the most hygienic product. And when we had that early data from India saying, oh my gosh, only 12% are using anything that's safe, that was striking. And we had to do something about it. And government sitting at that ability to say, oh, we can provide this at scale, came in and said, well, sanitary pads are a solution. But here's where we have an opportunity to begin to shift that narrative. If we created that narrative saying that we need to step in, we need to provide pads, and we need to provide free pads because the people who don't have access are those who are from low income backgrounds, who are disadvantaged, we can also begin to change that narrative. And that narrative is already being changed. There are menstrual health activists and educators and NGOs, and so many of us here who have been working at it. And we've seen change. Look at Kerala. They were the first to introduce the Tinkle cups in Alappuzha district. You've got Siddipet municipality who has introduced cups. You've got Jharkhand that had the Missy Garima program about reusable cloth pads. So and we are seeing other governments. I think Madhya Pradesh during the first COVID lockdown said, let's train our Anganwadi workers on making reusable cloth pads. And Lakshmi ji and her Jatan Sansthan team, over 80,000 Anganwadi workers in Madhya Pradesh were trained on that. So it's not that government is not cognizant, I think, of the fact that we need to expand the product basket. The question is, how do we do it? How do we ensure access to these products? How do we provide that handholding support? Which products do we choose? There are a number of technical issues related to procurement, but I'll put them aside. But here's where I think as a very large and vibrant community of people who are sitting on these field insights and evidence on where reusable products can work, it's time that we come together and make that evidence more easily available. How can we come together and put this to government saying, by the way, here's how we can expand that product basket. Here's what you can do. Here's how you can, if you're worried about quality certification and standards, well, now we've got BIS standards for reusable cloth pads and menstrual underwear. How can you bring that into government procurement? So I think being able to share not just like hardcore research insights, but also field insights that we have from so many CSOs. How can we put that out there? And play that supportive role in saying, here's how we can begin to roll out access of reusable menstrual products as well. So I can go on about this, but I'll pause here. But there is scope and there is stuff that we can do to widen that product basket.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Arundati. So, in your conversations, you also add that if we have to, distribute. So do you believe in distributing free sanitary napkins to, let's say, educational institutions yet, considering even the product basket that you introduced? So, do you believe we should be providing free product baskets?
Tricky question, Ruthvika. Thanks for putting me on the spot with that. So I've always been, I think, always in two minds about free distribution versus other models that we are able to enable access to essential product. So I think that free distribution has a place when there is a very big need or there's a huge gap, and we know that certain groups, certain populations completely lack access, and it is an important service that we need to provide or an important product that we need to give. It has its place to fill that gap momentarily. It is a temporary measure. Free distribution, it's hard for us, for any of us, if you're a government, NGO, an individual with a good heart, for us to ensure consistent supply of free products for years on end. And I think that is my concern with free distribution. Yes, it has its place. It can be advantageous. It can help fill that gap at that moment. But while we fill that gap at that moment, at that year, how can we think about other access models where this product basket can be made available so that any menstruator can manage this in the long term? One thing is free distribution for girls in schools, fine. If governments have the money and can do this sustainably over years, that's great. But what happens after she's in 10th standard? What happens when she leaves school and she's now hooked on to a particular product? She wants that product. It gives her comfort, security. Now, how are we enabling that access after her school years? And that's something we do have to think about. What happens if a girl, for any reason, drops out of school? What happens to her access to product? So I think that, again, we while we do the free distribution, we all need to start thinking about different access models, financially, in terms of products, so that sustained access and sustained use of safe, hygienic products continues.
Great. Wow. That was a tricky question, but you've taken it and answered it amazingly. Thank you so much, Arundati. And moving to Nirmala. Nirmala, you've been talking about behavioral change advocacy for, at a larger scale. So, in your journey of driving social impact, what examples have you come across that showcase the positive ripple effects of improved menstrual hygiene on communities beyond the immediate hygiene effects and impacts?
I'm going to come to like very specific examples of things that have happened around us. And for instance, a few years back, when we had no technology in Siddharth Nagar, and we were playing games with girls on the ground. I think the whole idea around, you know, when we started talking to the girls, what we realized was that they'd never said Mahabari loudly, and the entire exercise became about voice. While we were talking menstruation, it essentially was about voice. It's about voicing something that's very, very important for them, that they'd never done before. Or working with factory workers, for instance, we did this entire exercise where women spoke to men about periods for the first time. And that's essentially a lesson in inequity, right? It goes way beyond hygiene. To be able to talk to a man in front of people about periods is something that many women struggle to do. Or when Sri Lekha Chakravarti in Jharkhand decides to paint a wall along with girls, it's essentially about expressing yourself freely, which many of those girls had never ever done. I'm not saying that you go around screaming that I'm on my period on the streets, but really, it's more about being able to speak about it if required. Whether if I'm in a work setup, I should be able to say that I am on my period and I need rest, or if I'm in an uncomfortable situation, I should be able to say it. And it's about having that confidence to say it. It's about having that space to say it. It's about not being judged for saying it. It's about not being discriminated for saying it. So it's all those things, and that is what a lot of this work sort of brings forth, because one of the examples that I was going to take is when Uninhibited works in schools with girls. What they're changing is not 5 days in their lives. What they're really changing is a lifetime. They're giving space to the girls to be able to talk about their bodies for the rest of their lives. And while I went away, I could hear what Arundhati was saying, and that's exactly what it is. Can MHM really can be looked at as an entry point to talk about a lot of issues that exist. And along with that, it can also become that enabling factor in a girl's life, which whereas till now it's been working the other way around, right? I mean, we're asked to step back the moment we start our periods. This could actually be an opportunity to help the girl step up once she starts her periods, if she can handle it confidently and has an enabling environment around her that supports her to do it.
Great. Yes, absolutely. Like you mentioned, I think this when you speak aloud or when you create that atmosphere for at least 20 girls in the room to speak loud about something that they've not been talking about, it itself, creates a safe atmosphere to talk about it, to start talking about their periods, at least to their peers, maybe as an exit plan as well. Once you leave that space, they could at least be comfortable in talking to their own friends, their own teachers in long run. Thank you, Nirmala ji. One last question that's for you, Nirmala, by Sumati. She asks if there's time, would like to ask Nirmala any interesting ways in which they have been able to involve girls in the conversation or self or peer advocacy. Yes, she recalls the Wash United's rap song that you and your team has created. that we were just talking about. Very, very inclusive way of using arts as a medium to, break the silence around periods and normalize menstruation. So, yeah, Nirmala, any suggestions?
I'm a huge believer in, I mean, it goes beyond using arts, right? It's really about being able to speak the language that girls want to hear. How do we be more inclusive in our conversations? We can't speak our language and expect people to start answering us. We have to speak the language that they speak. And I think the rap video really comes from there. That was a time, it was created at a time when Gully Boy was about to release. Rap was massive in the country at that point of time. None of us on the team had ever heard rap, Indian rap for sure. But we decided that we're going to be creating a rap video only because we wanted to speak exactly to the people who were listening to that music, and who were getting swayed by it. And it was fantastic that DMC came on board, and created that piece. So I think a large part of being able to talk to young people is, can we speak to them in their language? Can we?
That's absolutely true. Using their language in order to break the silence around periods, so that they're more comfortable instead of just using our own language. I mean, a lot of times this also happens when we go to tribal communities. We identify this one or two enthusiastic individuals, either young adults, and then they are very keen on understanding the concept in either Hindi or Telugu, whichever language, that common language that we could speak to them in, and then they translate it into either a Gond or a Kolam tribal language and pass it on to their own, network of people. That's something we have seen. I think going back to what you have mentioned, Arundhati, we don't have to make some huge changes in our policy or additions to the policy, but at least whatever small practices that we are, initiating at a local level, that's what we could standardize, and we could probably structure it in a way where we could reflect upon. So, Arundhati, the last question is: any two asks or recommendations that you have for the, comprehensive policy that we all are talking about?
Uh, a lot of us, but I will stick to two. One is, let's make it a comprehensive policy. I would say that, while I do think schools are a very important entry point, and children in schools are critical. We catch them young. We're able to engender those, healthy behaviors through their life. However, we are presented with a very important window and opportunity here for a comprehensive policy. And by that, I mean that addressing those big pillars of work, so that we're addressing all aspects of menstrual health to the extent possible, and that we're able to address menstrual health and hygiene for every person who has a period. Schoolgirls, adolescents, adult women, people with gender diverse identities, people in humanitarian settings, refugees, women in prisons. I mean, I think so. I think that we have this opportunity to make it comprehensive. Second would be budgets. A policy is great, fantastic commitment, but we need commitment, financial commitments to see that the policy is translated into action. So that would be my second one, is that let's commit the finances to be able to roll this out.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So, comprehensive policy and the budgets. And you beautifully highlighted the three pillars as well in the beginning of the call for those who have missed out. Please do watch the webinar. This is live and saved on Kaboom Talks platform. So, yes, so we'll move on to Nirmala ji. Back
I
in
think
for
I'm going to
you.
add the comprehensiveness of the policy itself, and really say, if a policy is going to come into making now, it really should be looking at the intersectionality. Anudati has been saying that menstruation is an intersectoral issue. And therefore, we should already be looking at the linkages between menstruation and health, menstruation and nutrition, menstruation and infrastructure, menstruation and climate change. Which everyone's talking about. So I think it'll be a lost opportunity if we don't look at the intersectionality while we're creating this large uniform policy in the country at this point of time. And of course, my second ask would be, we need to have a provision to see how is the new narrative around building. I mean, I know that policies are not really about looking at sociocultural changes, but the language of the policy can, hugely impact how one talks about menstruation going forward, and that is something that we should definitely be aware of and recommending. In the, I mean, whoever's recommending, I'm not, but whoever is that would be an ask for sure.
Great. Thank you, Nirmala. So, intersectionality and comprehensive policy, making budgets, adding budgets to the policy so that it could be administered properly, and of course, monitoring and evaluation, proper systems to monitor, record the data that that is being implemented, maybe on MHAi or maybe on another in another way that is accessible to all those who are in the MHM space, either policymakers or the project mentors, or let's say just the menstruators. So that was the today's panel discussion. I had amazing fun and, of course, a lot of insights from across the country at a policy level. At this, I think I think you have an experience as old as me. So thanks to you, Arundati. Thanks to you, Nirmala, for sharing your insights. Here we end the panel discussion, but we do not end the conversations about menstrual hygiene management. So, yes, let's continue talking about MHM in our own spaces. And if you have any questions, please do reach out to us. Any of the platforms, it could be either Kaboom Talks or directly to Arundati, Nirmala, or me on Youngistan's platform. So, yes, thank you so much for joining and signing off with our panel discussion. Before we leave, we'd also like to inform you that we have a couple of more videos that we will be sharing the kind of policies, menstrual health and hygiene policies that are in India, because there are many, not just one. So, the MHH collective has made 15, a collection of 15 policies into a form of a video. Then we have Karan Babbar, who's a researcher who will also be sharing nuances of what a policy is and how we could look at the uniform policy. So all these videos will be adding up onto Womcom Matters, LinkedIn, and social media platforms. Please do get in touch with us there. If you would like to contribute in any which ways possible, please connect with us. On that happy note, thank you so much for your time, for your energy.